Lecture, I'd like to talk about some of the historical roots of rehabilitation practice, actually going before we had rehabilitation practice and going to a point where we're looking more really at attitudes than at precursor activities related to rehabilitation. And we're going to start off by looking at attitudes of disabilities over the centuries. Just a kind of a brief summary of these issues. And the first slide talks about attitudes towards persons with disabilities during the Greek and Roman era. And what looking at here during the Greek and Roman eras is that the belief that the unity of the body and the soul, and as a result, if you weren't whole in the sense of not having a physical disability, people had negative attitudes towards persons who were who had disabilities, and often children who were viewed as, quote, deformed were killed. And these attitudes were influenced by various mythologies and by social standing. And so what we see here is that in the Greek and Roman eras, there were very negative attitudes towards people with disabilities. In the Middle Ages, attitudes towards people with disabilities were viewed as being punishment. People with mental illness were viewed as being possessed by demons or by something that was evil because they had done something that was evil. Religious leaders, monks and priests, would often treat individuals with disabilities, physical disabilities, and mental illness rather than those who were viewed as physicians because of the belief that there was a religious nature to the disability or the illness that the person had. And so what we have is in earlier times views that people who had who had a disability were viewed as being possessed by demons, were viewed as having done something that was wrong, and they were being punished because of, as a result, they had a disability. They were being punished, and the punishment was because of whatever they had done wrong was having a disability. Coming to the early era in America after the country was beginning to be settled, there was and after we had the colonies established, the 13 colonies, self-sufficiency was viewed as being important, and it was almost a notion of quote, survival of the fittest. We had laws in the colonies that excluded individuals who could not be self-sufficient. And as in earlier times, disability was viewed as some sort of punishment for some wrong that the person had done. And people with disabilities were often viewed as not being whole individuals, as being second or third class citizens. And then treatment of mental illness was based on social economic status, and also how the injury or the illness was affecting them. It wasn't based upon some sort of treatment model of expectations of people being able to function in the community, in society. And as you'll see in your readings, that often people who had a mental illness were put into some sort of confinement. They were put into straitjackets. Later on, people had electroshock treatment or had lobotomies, And of course, this was before the time when there were medications. So after the country was settled, the treatment of people with physical and mental disabilities was very different than we have today. That there was not a sense that everyone can participate in society. It was to a great extent survival of the fittest, self-sufficiency. Later on in the 19th century, we had Gallaudet, who pioneered education for individuals with hearing impairments. We had Dorothea Dix worked with individuals with mental illness to promote more humane treatment and more humane approaches in mental hospitals. We had advances in surgical procedures. And then I'm going to give you a lecture by video on legislation. But here are some of the major pieces of legislation leading up to the 1973 Rehabilitation Act. Now, as I said, I'm going to do these by a video, but here is the PowerPoint for this. Here are the major pieces of legislation being the 1917 Smith-Hughes Act, the 1918 Soldiers Rehabilitation Act, the 1920 Smith-Fess Act, the 1935 Social Security Act, the 1954 vocational, the amendments to the Rehabilitation Act in 1954, other amendments to the Social Security Act. In the mid-1960s, there were also amendments to the Rehabilitation Act. And during this time period, there is also a piece of legislation I'll be talking about, which led to the development of the vending stand program for people who had visual impairments, and that legislation is still in place today. But as I said, I'll be getting to that in a video lecture.